as a physician and as a patient advocate, were you surprised by the number of people who seemed to take satisfaction in the murder of the United Healthcare CEO?
You know, I had a weird feeling you were going to lead with something like that. Am I surprised? No, I'm not. Uh, I think there's a lot of people who are enraged about the insurance industry right now. Look, I've been in practice for nearly 32 years, and there's doctors who are probably in my generation who were saying, look, I understand this, but violence isn't going to get you anywhere. It's not the answer. And then there was this one particular young doc, I think he is a resident, and I mean, besides making a lot of flippant remarks, which you got to really be careful about what you put online. The remarks he was making were I thought, almost radical in cheering it on and thinking it was funny. There's nothing funny about murder. At the end of the day, this person's family lost somebody. And look, am I going to sit here and tell you that the insurance industry should be able to continue to do what they want to do and be off with not be on the hook for anything? Absolutely not. I have had to do far more than I care to mention prior authorizations just for medications for patients. And it's an extremely frustrating process. There are some weeks I will spend at least 5 to 6 extra hours of my time fighting to get a medication approved. And now what's happening is the insurance companies are actually asking for authorizations for certain generic meds because they're now excluding them from their formularies. So am I surprised at the reactions that I've seen, which have been kind of all over the place? No. Am I surprised that some people have taken satisfaction from the death of an insurance company CEO? No. Am I sitting here losing sleep over what happened to him? I'm going to be completely blunt. No, I'm not. I also don't think this is going to be the last time we see something like this, although I hope I'm wrong. I don't want to see more violence. I want to see change.
What was your gut reaction to the news of the murder of the United Healthcare CEO in broad daylight on the streets of Manhattan last month? Was it perhaps a little more heartless than you would care to admit? While I personally am horrified by the murder, it got me thinking about the ethics of insurance denials and the overall health of our health insurance system in this country. So today, I'm talking with Dr. Daniel Block, a psychiatrist who has been a department chair, co-chair of a hospital ethics committee, and medical director of Addiction Recovery Center. He's also currently a review board member for the publication VeryWellMind. Since earning his degree at Temple University, Block has become a staunch patient advocate, particularly in the area of insurance denials, as well as in the patient education. Today, we are covering everything from the effect of AI on health insurance to the labyrinth of prior authorization to the extra lengths that many good doctors must go to. According to Dr. Block, the health insurance system is not broken. It is working, unfortunately, exactly in the way that it was designed to. Let's provide some context on you. You were the chair of the psychiatry department at then Southern Chester County Medical Center, which is now Jennersville Regional Hospital, but also you were the head of the ethics committee.
Yep.
Please tell me, what does that entail?
I was actually the co-chair with my colleague who's an anesthesiologist at the hospital at the time. What happens is we would meet usually monthly unless there was an emergency meeting convened to discuss a potential ethical issue in how care was being administered in the hospital. And, you know, kind of our job was to talk about it, debate it, and then make a recommendation to whoever was the attending physician in charge of said case. Yeah. So the example might be somebody is hospitalized and obviously has a reduced mental capacity. One of the thorny issues that I would be asked, for instance, is, well, we need to render this person incompetent so we can go ahead and give care. And, you know, so that might be referred to the ethics committee because maybe the person was suffering from a raging infection, needed IV antibiotics, or the person was going to die from sepsis, and the person was refusing care, clearly not mentally clear. So we might get referred a case there. You know, a doctor says, the family doesn't want anything to do with this person, so they're not going to give consent. We want to go ahead with antibiotics. Can we just go ahead and do that?
Okay.
And we would then sit down and talk about it, make our recommendations. And then in my other role as a psychiatrist, I would be called in as a consulting psychiatrist. And once I got past the hurdle, I can't be the one to say incompetent. It's a legal term. It's not a clinical term. We would go ahead, and then usually you can get an emergency court order to provide
For
treatment.
someone's best interest, right?
Okay.
So I understand that you go into medicine to first do no harm, right?
Right.
And part of it is if someone's going to do harm to themselves, then you are supposed to step in, get involved, be willing to substitute your judgment for their judgment if they are going to harm themselves, right? Now, the problem is that people look at insurance companies, health insurance companies, almost as an extension of the do no harm idea of what being a doctor is all about. And we both know that is not the case. So in that context, I read the article that you wrote about having a disabled patient with restless leg syndrome. Can you describe for my audience what you describe as your best day as a physician?
I was kind of hoping that would be one of the ones you brought up because I'm going to say that on a darker note. When that happened, that's when it really started to dawn on me just how bad this had become and how much worse it was going to get. So I have to preserve patient confidentiality. He has since passed. He passed a number of years ago, but I'm not going to use any identifying information. So what happened was this. He had been disabled by a severe childhood illness. And this guy was brilliant. And he was a very large personality, a large man because he couldn't exercise and he ate too much. And everything about him was just big. He was very enjoyable to talk to. He was a brilliant mind. So I had become really fond of him. And as he aged, he developed restless leg syndrome. But with this particular guy, because he was in such poor health, often if he didn't sleep for a couple days, as he got older, he would go into heart failure. So at the time, I had samples of a particular restless leg medicine that had become available in the market. So, I'm free with my samples. If people can't afford their medicine, and he really couldn't, I would just give it away. And I finally had to prescribe it. And back then, the price for it just retail was ridiculous. So I went ahead and I put in a prior authorization. Meanwhile, I'm frantically calling the drug rep saying, can you please bring me some more samples for this guy? So I carried him for samples as long as I could. And of course, the insurance, which was a Medicare-based prescription, like their prescription drug plan, they denied it. And I had provided information to the insurance company that if he doesn't sleep for a few days, and he surely won't if his restless legs get lacked up, he may end up in heart failure, and he usually has to be hospitalized. You would think that an insurance company hearing that would say, well, we don't really want to pay for a hospitalization. Yeah, let's just go ahead and put the medicine.
Yeah.
So the moment that I realized just how bad this had become was the denial letter contained 4 other medicines they wanted me to have tried. And the kicker, none of them were FDA approved for restless leg syndrome. They were used off-label for restless leg syndrome. So I quickly wrote a letter back, sent it to the insurance company, faxed it to them back then, and pointed that out. I got another denial letter. Patient doesn't meet criteria for this particular drug. These 4 drugs need to be tried first. Now you can see, so I'm frustrated, he's frustrated.
And time is of the essence with this.
And time is of the essence because I'm running out of samples. So I looked at the name of the staff person for this Medicare PDP that was denying it. And it turns out he was both a lawyer and a pharmacist. So, I was sufficiently pissed off at the time. I looked him up online.
Yeah.
The most outrageous thing was he had somehow or another permitted his cell phone to be online.
All of our cell phones are online. Isn't everything online?
I'm sure it is. This was just a regular old Google search. And so I called the guy. And I said, you are the signing authority on this prior authorization denial. How'd you get my number? So I decided, all right, when I need something, I can get it. That's all I said to him.
It's not that hard. I don't know why people think that's hard, but anyway.
So I was hoping to induce some fear. So
Yeah.
here's what I told him, basically back then. Look, this is what happens. If you don't approve this, here's what's going to happen. And at the time, I did have a contact who was doing the health talk at Fox, the news program in Philadelphia at the time. He was a former neighbor of mine. I was going to go to him and ask if he wanted to do a story on things like this. And I also told him I was going to give his name to the patients and the patient's family and was going to encourage them to pursue legal action.
So first of all, I gotta interject here and say I hope at some point you're my doctor, because that's good stuff. You hope the people around you take what you're going through personally, but more than anybody, you hope your doctor takes it personally. And this
I take
became
it personally every
personal.
single time, every patient. I don't care if that person sees me 4 times a year or if it's a weekly therapy patient. And so
So what happened? Yeah.
24 hours later, now this was like close to an 8-week process to go through all this. 24 hours later, I get a call from my patient telling me they approved it. And I thought, all right.
Right.
I figured they were going to just leave us alone. But a year or so later, he got the same denial. So here's what I did. I thought, all right, I gave the patient his cell phone number and said, I'm going to do my prior author, but if you feel like calling him and letting him know your story, by all means. He made the number public.
Yeah.
He called me back and he said, I don't think there's going to be a problem. I got the guy's wife. And he ended up he ended up talking her ear off for an hour. And they left us alone after that. And actually I was able to continue to get his medicine until he eventually passed.
Well, and that's the good version of the story, but unfortunately for the vast majority of people, A, they'll never have a doctor like you that's going to go to bat for them. B, even if the doctor does, who knows if you can find the number? Who knows if you get somebody on the other end of the line that doesn't just say, this is harassment or whatever it is. So this is not the typical outcome.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on just how savvy the doctor or the doctor's staff gets on how to do these prior authorizations and knowing what needs to be written to get things approved. I'll tell you, like, I'll fill out an authorization request. I'll get an immediate denial saying not enough information was provided. I'll look on what I provided. It was provided.
Yeah.
And then they'll say, well, we need documentation from your medical records. I am not giving patients private records. I refuse. I refuse to violate a patient's privacy just to satisfy some stupid criteria that an insurance has for a drug that doesn't even cost that much half the time, but even for the costly ones. So what I will do is I have a form letter that I made up for one patient on my letterhead. It looks like records, and I have a quick way of restating everything I already put in the prior auth request. Oh, that satisfies their need for documentation. It's ridiculous. And there have become more and more layers on how to get a prior authorization done. Right now, the other big one is, like, sometimes I'll have an insurance company provide a prior authorization for 2 years instead of 1 year. The next year, I get the same request. Mm-hmm. So then, like, I figure, all right, they messed something up. I'll put it in, and then I'll get a document back saying prior auth not needed. There's already an existing prior auth. So they don't know what they're doing either. But you can see what happens is, for us in the medical side, this creates a lot of added layers of work. And, my family doctor's office has a dedicated 2-person staff just to take care of this for all their doctors. Think about that. They have to pay 2 people out of their revenue stream in order to make sure that their patients get meds approved.
Literally to manage the insurance process. How long does it take until the insurance companies then start to seek out doctors like you and say, if you are the kind of doctor who knows how to game the system, how much are we going to need to pay you to teach us how to make the system ungameable? Right?
I have not been approached like that, but I'm funny you say that. A couple years ago, I thought, I've always had this fantasy that I would work for one of these companies, probably long enough to get fired for just approving everyone's care. But I did end up undergoing an interview process for just such a position because I thought, all right, clinical practice, 30, 31 years, it's a lot after a while. I was looking for a change, and I thought I could maybe do some good from the other end and educate them on how to be better for their constituent members. Unfortunately, I mean, it's probably a good thing that the recruiter who had contacted me originally um, was, let's put it this way, talk about ethics. I'm not, he had a slippery floor for his ethics. The
Hmm.
information he gave me didn't quite line up to what they had in mind.
Yeah.
So I backed out very quickly, but it probably would have burned me out in 3 months. I don't think that their care criteria are grounded in medical reality and good clinical care. And in my opinion, and if you want to get back to ethics, they're in a sense, this is practicing medicine without a license.
Well, and it goes back to who set up this a kind of like constellation system of rules and regulations to begin with. We know that most people experience insurance denial, either for prior authorization or unexpected bills after care is received. We also know this doesn't happen, for example, with car insurance, right? This is the only system of insurance that is this opaque is health
Exactly.
insurance.
Exactly.
What's the insurance industry's stated justification for how opaque the rules are?
You know, that's a really good question. I don't know how they justify it. I know that if you work for an insurance company in this capacity, you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And knowing what I know about human motivation and human behavior, I would say it's purposely opaque.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there was a specific design that went into it other than at the end of the day, if you are a shareholder in some insurance company, you're going to want to know how the stock's doing at the end of the day. If at the end of the day it looks good, whoever's on that board, they're doing their job. CEOs and all, they're doing their job. The health insurance executive who was murdered was at an investors meeting,
Hmm.
and they were there to talk about profit.
What I would love to see most, if we could get under the hood, is the actual cost benefit analysis that has been run. We know they're running statistical models, and we know that somewhere in that model, the result that was spit out was it makes us more money to deny 90,000 early breast cancer screenings than to pay for the 10,000 women of those 90,000 who would have been able to be saved, but who at the end will still be our clients and will have to pay for their mastectomies and their end of life hospice care. That's the actual number. At some point, that number was run, right? Are all of those numbers being viewed separately or as a whole? Because if they're being viewed as a whole, this really is an ethical issue. It's really profit over human life. If it's not being viewed that way, it's being viewed as we have certain number of dollars that we can purvey for preventative care, and this particular indication is less likely to lead to cancer if not caught in stage one than this one. It's a very different thing, right? But we can't see under the hood. So there are some high level questions I have for you. One is, what, if anything, does the public misunderstand about prior authorization?
That's a good question. I'm certainly the murder of a health insurance executive brought a lot of that out to light. The public is a lot more savvy now about the process, but there's probably plenty of people who just go to the pharmacy after a meeting with their doctor and expect just to pick up their medication. And then when they're told it's denied, they get really upset. And I think there is a lot of that. And I think people who may not have access to information or a solid education about how healthcare insurance works, they're going to be the ones who are just going to go and get really upset. And unfortunately, then sometimes they'll end up yelling at the pharmacist. It's not the pharmacist's fault. It's not the
Mm-hmm.
pharmacy tech's fault. The pharmacies are at this point many times understaffed and overworked and not paid well enough either. And the pharmacies are part of the healthcare side, but a lot of
Mm-hmm.
times uh, the anger and dissent is directed towards them because they're immediate.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
but
they're
I
standing literally between you and the medicine.
Yes, exactly. And
It's interesting. You mention kind of being smart enough or aware enough, I guess, or educated enough to be able to know how to work the system. There was a KKF study that I was reading, KKF study in 2023, I believe, said that among insured adults who had a problem with their health insurance in the past 12 months, almost 78% say they tried to resolve the problem, but only 1 in 10 say they filed an appeal. So 80% are saying that we have an issue. 10% are taking the step of filing an appeal, which is really just paperwork or some sort of a form. 1 in 5 insured adults who had a problem with their insurance say they took none of these actions. 22% literally just
Wow.
gave up and said, I have a problem with my insurance. I'm not going to. Now, we know that insurance companies are banking on that because numbers are numbers and profit is relevant and you have to keep a company going. Interestingly, many people assume that education makes insurance easier to understand, right? And I've always thought there was this disparity in health insurance access just based on who feels comfortable to self advocate. Generally, that's someone like me or you who believes the system ought to work. But that's not the case. They say that this KKF study said that having a college degree does not significantly make insurance any less confusing. They surveyed something like 3,000 people. So, my question for you is, in your opinion, are insurance companies just betting that people's frustration will outweigh their stamina to pursue care?
I will bet you that on some higher executive level, if it's not verbalized in meetings, it's thought, and that thought process goes into the decision-making process for how they develop their policies. I would bet. See, the problem here is it's such a like your term under the hood, we can't see under the hood is perfect
Mhm.
because as long as that hood is locked closed, we're never really going to know what discussions are being made. But come on, I mean, you look at human nature. If somebody is profit driven, and that's the main motivation, and a CEO of a health insurance company, his or her job is, or their job is to make sure that the profit margins remain good. So that's what they're supposed to be doing. And sure, I would bet you that they're hedging on the fact that people are going to get frustrated or people are just going to go away and deny it long enough. It's demoralizing. So let's just say you're someone who suffers from severe migraines. If your insurance company denied it, you're going to have to submit an appeal. And you are disabled from your migraines. You've maybe had to leave your job because you can't get the migraines under control. The insurance won't approve one of the newer migraine medicines. You tried it once, it worked, but now you can't use it again because you paid out of pocket once for it. It's just too expensive. Are you going to have the energy and the wherewithal to research, write a strong appeal letter, and then maybe even go further? Probably not. And it creates a deep well of despair and demoralization, I think.
There's the emotional side of it, and then there's the profit side of it. And if you take the emotional charge out of it, um, typically you can find a way to make a case that is rational and not emotionally driven. There has to be a balance where it will cost less to provide early care than it will cost to take care of people as they're dying.
Ideally, I completely agree with you. It would be too much common sense to do that. I think when you are looking at such a powerful motivator as money, I don't think you're going to see it. The only person to date who I know who has tried to make a difference that I'm aware of, there might be others, Mark Cuban. Mark Cuban is a very wealthy man, and he created something called cost plus drugs several years back. It has made the purchase of generic medications completely transparent. He actually, on his website, it shows cost of manufacturing, 15% markup to run the nonprofit, $5 shipping and handling. One of my patients who had no insurance and always struggles financially needed some medicines that are in my field are fairly expensive, even as generics. So he was just basically going to have to do without. The only thing that Mark Cuban's pharmacy cannot do right now is controlled substances. But long story short, what would have been $1,200 a month for him for all of his medications came down to just under 100, which he was able to afford. So I think from the angle of looking at things as they are and probably not going to change, It's going to take more individuals like him who could choose to take action.
Yeah.
And it's a shame because the insurance industry certainly could make inroads, and they are in a position where they could do good, where they could really help the health of America. Profit is going to trump that every single time because money is the powerful motivator here.
One way to look at it is, what if health insurance wasn't privatized, right?
Sure.
But it's not as if the government is efficient. So let's just be clear
Exactly.
about
I'm going
public.
to say, I mean, you've seen how Medicare operates, right?
Right,
I mean,
right. And then there was the American Medical Association. I was reading an article, and they were claiming, in response to all this, they were claiming that they are attempting to fix the issue of prior authorization by, quote, challenging insurance companies to eliminate care delays, patient harms, and practice hassles. What does that even mean?
that just sounds
Challenging?
Yeah, that sounds like word salad to me. Some legislator or somebody on the Medicare side decided, yeah, this is going to be a really good idea. Is it going to get done? I'm happy to go on record as saying the system is not broken. It's operating exactly the way the people who designed it to operate. And it's operated to be a profit-driven, they're all private companies, and, we aren't, like Finland, for instance, they are a socialist democracy. People always say, no, they're a socialist country. No, they're not. But guess what? Medicare, that's socialist. Medicaid, that's socialist. Fire departments, that's all socialism. The problem here is you also got a lot of misunderstanding about that. But that, I digress. The point here is that I think I can appreciate and sympathize with you on thinking the insurance industry needs to be reformed. But I just think with the power that they hold, the end around would be helping people do a lot better managing their own health so they don't need the insurance as much. What if we start to raise generations of people who are living longer and not getting really sick? They're not, hypertension.
That would be amazing.
Right? Hypertension, modern illness. Diabetes, modern illness. Other inflammatory conditions, most of the time modern illness. Allowing for the fact that genetics do play a role, but otherwise these are modern illnesses. What's the common denominator? It's our food, our environment, and behavior. So if education can start to shift, and we can start to improve people's understanding of their own power to be in charge of their health. And this is not to set up people to be responsible and blame themselves if they do get sick, but just to improve the education level and the tools people have.
Well, and I think there's understanding and then there's incentivization. But I do want to go back to what you said, because you made the point that the healthcare system is not broken. It's operating the way it was designed to operate. How is AI impacting it?
Oh, good Lord.
Is that not just making it worse? Is that not just making it a stronger beast?
I agree with you. I think AI is making it a stronger beast. I guarantee you some of the prior authorization denials I get, there's no human looking at those documents. It's an AI. It's quickly scanning through millions of bits of data and coming up with a denial based on whatever criteria are there for denial. And that's why a lot of times I have noticed I get denials back faster now. I also will get approvals back faster. And I will say, for the record, I get about a 90% approval because I've just figured out how to streamline the process and get people what they need. But
for the record, you're my new doctor. I just decided
but yeah,
so, I don't know where you live. That's what happened.
So back in the 50s or 60s, an author named Frank Herbert wrote a series called Dune. People know it by the movies. The whole premise of it was based on artificial intelligence had gotten outlawed because it had become too powerful and it had taken over. It was kind of a sweeping saga that covered religion, sociology, politics, human behavior, everything you could imagine. But he forecasted a lot of this. There's going to be a point where AI is going to become sentient at some level. And right now, I think the insurance companies, with the deep pockets they have access to all the technology to have the latest and greatest AI. And I think it is being employed a lot more. And I think the insurers are using this as a way to speed up the process, streamline. Certainly, they can hire fewer humans if they've got AI doing the work for them. And so I think right now, you and I might not even know who or what is making the decision denying our medication.
But you and I are dinosaurs because the way I think about this is you can't tell me that ChatGPT being able to write an essay is ever going to replace a true novelist. And not everybody thinks that way. And certainly the next generation is not growing up thinking that way because they're not seeing the change. There was a comedian that said, people who are under the age of 40 today do not understand how much has changed in our lifetime. Here's an example. Remember when sunblock was invented? And everybody in the audience just loses it.
We used to go out and get that first burn of the year so we could tan. And then we
Yeah.
would enhance the tan with baby oil, or suntan lotion, which was just more of like a hydrating thing. There really wasn't very much sun protection in those. Yeah.
We were so dumb. It was great. And my kids will never be able to be as dumb as me, but they'll be dumb in their own special ways. What makes you hopeful about all of this? Does anything make you hopeful about all of this?
I'm normally an optimistic person. You ask anyone in my family, I've usually been the one who's positive about things. I'm talking about a pretty dark subject here, but I think it's an important subject to talk about. I'm glad you asked me to do it. Uh, am I hopeful that we're going to see a change in our insurance industry to the point where they focus on prevention and they start to put human health over profit? Unfortunately, I am not hopeful that we're going to see that. I think it's going to get worse, and I think the contributions from AI may accelerate that process.
So, is there any case that comes to mind where you were not able to fix something for your patient?
There have been a few. I mean, the closest I came was a number of years back. There was a patient of mine who was on a brand name antidepressant. And a lot of times the generics are not as well controlled, and they're not even, a lot of them aren't produced here, they're produced overseas, so where there's not the same level of control and scrutiny. So she tried the generic, and within a few days, she started to notice a return of depression. What I don't know if your readers know this, but written in the bylaws of the FDA, a generic medication has to be bioequivalent. That means if I give you 100 milligrams of generic X, it's the same 100 milligrams found in brand X.
Sure.
What people don't know is that generic X is permitted to behave in your body as if you got anywhere from 80 to 125% of the targeted dose. Years ago, I had a woman develop lithium toxicity. Nothing had changed. The only reason I ordered a lithium level was because she was stable. She didn't feel depressed, but she was having all these other symptoms of depression, which could be a sign of lithium toxicity. So, among other things, including her increased thirst and urination, I ordered a lithium level. Her lithium level had shut up the toxic range. The only change back then, the pharmacy had switched her to generic. So the brand name that she had, I submitted a prior auth for it so she could get it because she had been on it for like 10 years, and now the insurance was acting up. They continued to deny it and tell the patient she didn't meet all the criteria. At this point, I called after I went on Facebook, Twitter, because I used to be on Twitter, and I started tagging the insurance company with a lot of different tags on how to get attention. Let's put it that way. So Facebook Messenger, you get this. We're very concerned. We would like to hear. Can you please? It's a form thing. So that's when I took to Twitter and I just started blasting them every day, several times a day. I finally got a phone call from a pharmacist. At this point, I have to admit I lost it. I lost my cool on the phone. You know what the issue was? I said that the generic had failed, but I failed to say that she could not tolerate the generic.
How is anybody supposed to be able to handle this? How is anybody supposed to be able to know these things?
I'm telling you, I can't make this stuff up. So I tore this person a new one. I was so angry. I said, so you're telling me this was denied because of semantics. So now, and I'm going to encourage all doctors out there to do this, or whoever else is listening, when you say that a generic didn't work, you need to say that the person could not tolerate it and it also failed to do its job. We're saying the same thing. What difference does it make? But because I didn't say both the drug failed and she couldn't tolerate it, that was their reason for something like 4 different denials. before I finally got it reversed.
It makes me wonder if AI can go in the other direction. If somebody could crowdsource all of the paper trails of the conversations that took place where people got approvals of things that were originally denied. I'm saying the AI of the insurance companies should be combated with AI from the people.
Oh, okay. You want to start something? I mean, I'm all for that. If we could make the process easier,
Crowdsource.
yes,
Yeah.
crowdsource it. I'd be all for it. If we can make the process easier for doctors' offices and for patients to advocate for themselves, yeah. Hey, I mean, I think that's a wonderful idea. Actually, I really do. You know,
I always come up with the ideas. The problem is I don't have a bright mind for medicine. So I tap into the bright minds of people like you. I will say this. Um, I do wish you were my doctor.
no, thank you.
Um, because there's a difference between a doctor who does their job and a doctor who cares and remembers what purpose was.
I should have to give a shout out to I mean, first of all, the way I was raised was about doing the right thing, and
Yeah.
I had amazing teachers. Temple's education back then was focused on the human side of patient care. I always tell this story. There was a surgeon when I was on my surgery rotation. His name is Robert Summers. He was probably one of my finest models on how to be a good physician, and but he knew exactly who he could joke with. He was a breast surgeon. He did a lot of breast cancer surgery and all. He knew exactly who he had to be serious with, and when he would go on rounds, he wouldn't start an exam or just start teaching or just look at the chart. He would sit on the woman's bedside or the man's bedside, sometimes hold hands. How you doing? Are you in any pain? Are they treating you okay? Is the food good enough for you? All of this stuff, he took the time to be human. And I think, in today's fast-paced medical environment, and with all of the pressures that are on physicians right now, physicians are suffering on a daily basis from moral injury. And I don't know how much moral injury has been brought up, but I think this whole issue of prior authorization that you and I have been talking about and insurance company denials is just adding to the burden of moral injury that we all experience throughout our careers, and it's increasing because there are so many draconian laws, and doctors now have to make sure that their EHRs are documented properly, or they may get docked pay. And healthcare systems, the administrators put quotas. Like some doctors have been let go because they weren't seeing enough patients or the productivity wasn't good enough. And this same thinking that's going into all these prior auths, it is all profit driven. So there's a lot of things that need to be changed. If you found a way to develop an AI system that could help promote some of that change or at least streamline the process, I think that would be wonderful. If it's something that could combat this process, help doctors glean through all this information and figure out what to say and how to say it better, sure, I'd be all for that.
Okay. Well, we'll get to work on that, and we'll call it selfadvocate.ai, and all of the profits will go to scholarships to med school.
Sure, scholarships to med school, or I don't know how you would do this, but just teaching people prevention in some way or another.
Oh, I got it. To creating organic farms in the middle of food deserts.
That's great.
Yeah. And you get your plate of vegetables or your box of vegetables for the week if you can show on your phone that you took your 10,000 steps that day. Because mama often gets all the good fruits and veggies for the kids and then just doesn't take care of herself. So what about her? Right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very old saying, I'm sure it just predates even my existence, an apple a day keeps the doctor away, right? And I think contained within that state, that old cliche, is just a very core truth. If you take care of yourself, and if that starts early in life, then there's a decent chance that you'll escape certain illnesses. So, I mean, it's one of the reasons when someone comes to me, I run a 2-hour evaluation. I have a whole dietary document that I email afterwards. I always tell people, look, this is a lot of information. Give yourself 6 to 9 months to make any major dietary change. And oh, by the way, I want you to try and start to develop some sort of an exercise routine. Start slow. And,
There's going to be a lot of success stories that you'll be able to take satisfaction in. I hope those are louder in your memory
they are.
than the people you're not able to necessarily help, because obviously this matters to you. But I like to ask people lightning round questions at the end of a podcast. What's the one thing you would change about prior authorization if you can wave a magic wand?
Oh, I'd eliminate it.
Okay. What's the biggest piece of advice that you have for a 47-year-old perimenopausal lady trying to spend the least possible time involved in dealing with the health insurance industry?
I'm not going to make any assumptions about how you live your life, but I encourage people strongly to work from a diet and exercise level, weightlifting as well, to make sure that you mineralize your bones.
If I weight train and I eat salads, then I can have my Wednesday night martini. Got it. Thanks, Doc. And the last question, because that's the deal we just made. You're my doctor now. And then the last question is, what would you be doing if you weren't doing this?
Oh, God. I don't know. I wanted to be in psychiatry for as long as I could remember. I probably would be doing something, working outside, maybe, and if you're looking as a second chapter, would love to work in national parks or doing something in the dirt, working with plants, just to be outdoors in nature, hike. It's such a disconnect from this world. I would definitely be outside.
Well, from the perspective of myself as a podcast host and all of the people who you're probably helping keep alive, I'm glad you found your calling, and thank you for making the time to talk to me today.
I really appreciate you asking me. This was a very pleasant surprise for me. I enjoyed doing this.